Pretty interesting stuff you find on Twitter once in a while. If you're not on Twitter, even if you have no intention of ever uttering a tweet, if you're a sports fan, if you're a soccer fan, if you're a Toronto FC fan, you need to be on Twitter because a lot of the most interesting little anecdotes certainly come out. And here's one that I found yesterday evening that I thought was pretty interesting. And I'm going to try to quote it verbatim. It says, quote, "Would like to dedicate that goal to Nana, Gordo, Jacob Peterson, Dero, and LaBroca with the hashtag, damn it feels good to be a gangster." That was a tweet that came from an account labeled, quote unquote, the real Dan Gargan. And I have it on good authority that that is indeed Dan Gargan's Twitter account, which he just activated last week. Hi everybody, Tim Drodge here, View from the South Stands, coming to you on Monday after TFC's once again most recent road loss, and I'll get to the road losses and the futility that comes from them a little bit later on in this video blog. But that of course was another in a long list of losses on the road this season. 2-0 to the Chicago Fire. Dan Gargan scored the second goal on a header, a nice goal. Full marks to Mr. Gargan for doing that. And Dominic Oduro scored the first goal, and I'll get to that one in a little bit. But getting back to Dan for a moment. He was pretty exuberant with the goal. He wasn't, rubbing it in the faces, I don't think, of Toronto FC. I think that tweet rubs it a little bit in the faces of Toronto FC, that's for sure. I'm personally not too terribly bothered by it. I don't think that Dan Gargan was as classy about it as Carl Robinson was, if you remember, and I've mentioned this a couple of times either on videos or in written posts on my blog over the last year about how classy Carl Robinson was. Robinson, if you remember, was a longtime TFC player, a leader on the club, basically gets frozen out by the former regime last year, goes to New York, and comes back in that 4-1 game that saw Thierry Henry make his debut in Toronto and score a late goal, and he refused to celebrate the goal. I think, frankly, few players, maybe in MLS, are as classy as a Carl Robinson was and is. So I think it's kind of unrealistic to hold everybody to the standards character-wise of Carl Robinson. So I'm not really going to do that for Dan Gargan. Dan was a good servant when he was here. I wish him well. I'm a little bit peeved, I think is maybe the best way to say it, with that kind of dig that he's making at the club. I think in retrospect, when his career is over, I hope he does remember that it was not any other club in Major League Soccer, but it was Toronto FC that sort of resurrected his career and brought him back from the soccer wilderness where he was playing D2 in Puerto Rico for the Islanders, and gave him a nice little tidy raise to boot. So I hope that any hard feelings he may have about being released/traded to the Chicago Fire sort of diminishes as time goes on, considering that, of course, it was TFC that brought him back to the promised land, so to speak, of North American soccer. So moving on from the most recent TFC player to score a goal against us, let's take a look once again at the game itself in a little bit of detail. I don't really want to go into a ton of detail because, frankly, I'm not really too concerned about this game. I'm more concerned, obviously, about the game coming up 2 days from now at BMO Field, the critical game against FC Dallas, which I'll touch on in a moment as well. The 3-4-3 reared its head again last night, and again, not to try and read anything into the mind of Aaron Vinter, because I don't know what's going on in his mind, but that's a couple of games now in a row where he's actually used this formation and put Torsten Frings along, in this case, with Richard Eckersley and Andy Iro as three defenders with four in the midfield and three up top. Last night it didn't work as well as it did against Real Salt Lake. TFC had a lot of possession. I think the numbers came out to be something like 59-41 for TFC. And their three defenders had good moments and bad moments. Eckersley was pretty aggressive all night, very pacey. I think he was lucky not to pick up a card or two based on the rashness and the aggressiveness of some of his tackles last night. I think it's fair to say that was just about Andy Iroh's best game in TFC colors last night. I think he looked much more confident and self-assured in what he was doing across the board. But again, unfortunately, a small defensive miscue with the super speedy Dominic Oduro saw Iroh give him about a meter of space in the box that actually saw him actually score the winning goal against TFC on Milos Kosic. And Torsten Frings played, of course, at center back again last night as well. And especially, I think, given the fact that Chicago was laying off and giving so much space between their forwards and their midfielders, there was so much room for a creative player like a Torsten Frings to operate in. Having him at the back last night, almost in retrospect, seemed a little wasteful. He's much more of an influential player in the outcome of these games, in my humble opinion, when he's playing in the midfield, shutting players down, pulling the strings, barking orders at both the midfielders and the defenders, and being a much more influential character on the outcome of the game when he's parked in the midfield than when he is trolling the back line. I understand that there are injuries. I understand that there's probably going to be a crisis of confidence in players like a Ty Harden, for example, or a Danley Borman on the back line, who played in the midfield last night, of course, rather than along the back three. I understand that, but hey, you gotta play your best players in the best positions, in my humble opinion. And I think, to a certain degree, I would rather have a chance to win with a Torsten Frings in the midfield, and play, for example, a kid like Donnell Henry at the back, than I would having Frings play at the back and see TFC go down the way that they did yesterday. That's just my humble opinion. Speaking of kids, Ashton Morgan and Matt Stinson did not look out of place last night. With another half dozen games to go in MLS this season, I think I would like to see much more of those kids play than I would also rans like Sulzma and Yorosowski and Martina, and players of that ilk that were brought in by this current regime when they started back in the spring, who I think collectively have proven that they're overpaid, they're overvalued for what they bring to the table, and they're just not good enough to cut it in this league. And we'll get to those guys in writing a little bit later on this week. Two other players that stood out for me as well, I think, were Milos Kosic, who again, for the third game in a row, has given a very credible performance as the Toronto FC keeper in lieu of a slightly injured Stefan Frei, who probably could play. He was on the bench again for the third game in a row. They didn't call up any backup keepers or anything like that. So Stefan Frei is dressing, which means he's fairly close to returning. But I'm quite pleased to see that Milos is actually stepping into that role and not making himself look in any way out of place since that howler he gave up against Real Esteli a few weeks ago. And finally, it pleases me to say Julian de Guzman looked pretty good last night. He had another one of those, again, recently patented 20-25 yard bombs from the central midfield, again with Chicago giving the Reds a lot of space to work. And what does he do? He pops it off the crossbar. That could have been his third goal in like 4 games, which would have been a quite impressive turnaround for a player who, without a doubt, has been very much a disappointment in his time at Toronto. And speaking of disappointments, I actually had to look this up last night. It took me a little bit of research to find it out. I actually tweeted last night, and my question on Twitter that I got a response on was, I was wondering if any team in the history of Major League Soccer had ever gone winless on the road before. And the answer to my research was, as a matter of fact, yes, there have been. There's been 7 teams that have gone winless in a Major League Soccer season previous to this one. The most recent was the absolutely horrible 2009 edition of the New York Red Bulls, their last season at the old Meadowlands, the old Giant Stadium on that AstroTurf. They beat the Reds, of course, 5-0 and cost us our closest chance ever at the playoffs. Not that I'm bitter or anything, but that was the last time that a team has actually gone winless. This is going to be the longest Major League Soccer season, so it looks like TFC, who have away games left in Columbus, which is going to be difficult, Chivas, which is going to be difficult, and Philadelphia, which is going to be difficult as well. I don't think they've won in any of those places before. They've won in LA against the Galaxy, I believe, but they've never beaten Chivas away. They lost in Philly last year, and of course, everybody knows TFC's record versus Columbus. So I think it's quite possible that last night's opportunity to get that win on the road would have been the best chance for TFC to get a win on the road, and I'm quite doubtful that that's going to happen between now and the end of the season. So it looks like it's going to be down between Toronto FC and the Vancouver Whitecaps for that ignominy this year. And with this being the longest season ever in Major League Soccer, I think there's going to be one of those two clubs, if not both of those clubs, setting that new record for road futility this year. And that's definitely something that's got to change as we go forward, doesn't it? Now, speaking of going forward, it's on to Dallas. It's on to the FC Dallas game Wednesday at home, 8 p.m. At BMO Field, the second game of TFC's six-game campaign in the group stages of the CONCACAF Champions League. We all know that Dallas beat Pumas last week, I should say, in Mexico City 1-0, albeit against a very understrength Pumas side. We know that Dallas lost at home this weekend past against the Seattle Sounders. And we also know that Dallas plays away next weekend in a critical game in their minds for automatic qualification into the MLS playoffs and a bye to that first round against Sporting Kansas City at Kansas City, a stadium where the formerly Wizards, now Sporting Kansas City, are doing extremely well since it opened, a couple of months ago. I think they won again yesterday, if I believe the numbers that I saw. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think they're still undefeated at home. Anyway, one of the things I think that is worthy of discussion, and I'll have more about the game in the next couple of days, including who the hell the referee is when I'm able to find that out. We know, unfortunately, how influential the last referee, the Cuban referee, Mr. Bray, was in the outcome, of course, down in Panama last week. But I think one of the major aspects of this game that I think is important to talk about is asking where FC Dallas's head is going to be. Are they going to be as focused on the Champions League as they might be otherwise, considering that they're fighting for one of those top three spots in the West? They don't want to have to play in that first round of the MLS playoffs. They want to get as advantageous a draw as they can. They want to move as far up the chain as they can. You've got LA that's reloaded right now with Robbie Keane. They won on the weekend. Seattle beat them at home on the weekend. You've got teams like that of course, Dallas is actually fighting in the West to actually try to overcome and get as high up the seed as they can. They've already gotten 3 road points at Pumas. So it's quite possible that they may take a little bit of a foot off the accelerator this week. They may not even start their absolute best starting 11, which I think, of course, Toronto FC will. But it's quite possible that Dallas may take the foot off the accelerator just a little bit, which might be to Toronto FC's advantage. So over the next couple of days, I'm going to have a ton of stuff on the ongoing Champions League campaign for the Reds. And I'd love to hear what you have to say as well. Right below me here is a comments box. I'd love for you to log in and leave us some thoughts as to what you think about what happened on the weekend, what you think about Dan Gargan, what you think about the 3-4-3 formation that the Reds have been running recently, and of course what you think about what's going to happen in that absolutely critical game versus Dallas this Wednesday at BMO Field. I'll be there in the South End on Wednesday, and I'll have another video blog up on early Thursday after that game, and I'll have a lot more in this space over the next coming days as well. One final thing that I want to actually let you guys know about as well is a new little writing endeavor that I've taken upon myself. There's a fairly new English football website called it's roundandwhite.co.uk. It's roundandwhite.co.uk, and I'll put the name of it in the credits at the end. I'm actually writing for that site going forward as their sort of MLS correspondent. I put a piece up last week, sort of an MLS primer, or primer, I think is the right term, for English soccer fans, to give them an idea on why MLS is a worthy product and why it's a little different than, of course, the way things are run over across the pond. And I'm going to be continuing to do that over the coming months. So if you ever get a chance to check that out, my byline, of course, is there, Tim Drodge, and I'll be writing about MLS for English fans as we go forward. And again, that website is roundandwhite.co.uk. So feel free to check that out as well. So thanks again very much for watching. You folks have a great week, and we'll see you all at BMO Field on Wednesday evening versus FC Dallas. Thanks again for watching. Cheers.